He landed at LaGuardia Airport, which is named for Fiorello LaGuardia, the first mayor of New York to serve 12 years in office. The next day, he rode to his arrest and arraignment in Lower Manhattan on FDR Drive, the most famous urban highway in America, named for Franklin Delano Roosevelt, a New Yorker who was the only president elected 4 times to the presidency before term limits were imposed by constitutional amendment. On his way to plead not guilty to a 34-count indictment approved by a Manhattan grand jury, he passed 2 federal courthouses, both named for New Yorkers. The Thurgood Marshall United States Courthouse, named for Supreme Court Justice Thurgood Marshall, who did his most important work as a civil rights lawyer while living in Harlem and running the NAACP Legal Defense Fund. The other was the Daniel Patrick Moynihan United States Courthouse, named for a New Yorker who served 24 years in the United States Senate. The glorious new addition to Penn Station on the west side of Manhattan is also named for Senator Moynihan. It is a short walk away from the Javits Center, a massive convention center named for Jacob Javits, who served 24 years in the United States Senate as a liberal Republican back when there was such a thing as a liberal Republican. The Javits Center is next door to the Lincoln Tunnel, one of the miracles of American infrastructure when it was completed in 1937 under the Hudson River. The Lincoln Tunnel, of course, named for President Abraham Lincoln. And it took some of the load off the spectacular George Washington Bridge, which crosses the Hudson River near Grant's tomb in Manhattan, a monument to President Ulysses S. Grant. As he rode back up FDR Drive after pleading not guilty, Donald Trump could gaze out the window at a magnificent monument to Franklin Delano Roosevelt that was built just a few years ago on Roosevelt Island in the East River. New York City is willing to change the names of important things in order to honor people who deserve such an honor. The name of New York City's largest international airport was changed to honor President John F. Kennedy after he was assassinated. And the name of the bridge Donald Trump drove across to and from LaGuardia Airport was changed recently to honor JFK's younger brother, Robert F. Kennedy, a New York senator who was assassinated in 1968 while running for president. Donald Trump knows that his hometown will never change the name of anything for him. The name Trump will never be honored in New York City. The name Trump in New York City, to borrow a phrase from FDR, will live in infamy. And Donald Trump knows it. And New York City proved it again yesterday when the protesters Donald Trump summoned to the courthouse to protest his arrest did not show up. It was a tiny turnout. By my count, walking among the crowd of Trump supporters, there were maybe 100 to 120 of them, not always easy to distinguish them from the news media near them. Donald Trump won only 12% of the vote in Manhattan in the last presidential election, but that's 85,185 votes in Manhattan. That means there were thousands of Trump voters who live within walking distance of the courthouse. Donald Trump couldn't get 1% of the people who voted for him in Manhattan to walk down to the courthouse or take the subway. Donald Trump understandably wants to move his trial to Staten Island, to cross the harbor on a ferry ride to Staten Island, because he won Staten Island in the last election. Staten Island is the only Republican section of New York City, and Donald Trump won 123,320 votes in Staten Island, and not 1% of the people who voted for him in Staten Island were willing to take a ferry ride over to the courthouse for Donald Trump. Donald Trump's biggest vote count in New York City was in his old neighborhood of Queens, where he got 212,665 votes. And it's possible that no one from Queens bothered to go to the courthouse, because that's how tiny the crowd for Donald Trump was. In New York City, Donald Trump got 691,682 votes. And at the courthouse yesterday, he got dozens of people. It was, as chance would have it, The single most beautiful day of the year, 2023, in New York City so far. The warmest, sunniest day of the year, and the anti-Trump protesters at the courthouse thought that wasn't a coincidence. That's one of the pictures I took among the anti-Trump crowd, which was at least as big as the Trump-supporting crowd. Donald Trump called for death and destruction yesterday, and he didn't get it.